Degloirespace signing in. Now you could be the parent of somebody, you could be someone's teacher, and you're trying to develop a way to connect with these people. And sometimes the people you're mentoring can give you quite a hard time. If you're the teacher, you know what behavioral issues are. If you're the parent, same thing. We see a lot of theories out there. Treat your kids like this, treat your students like this. We see a lot of this. And we trial. Some things are backed by research. Some things are not. They're just like cultural influence. And everyone is trying to look for that winner. They're trying to look for a golden method that, you know what, if I apply this to my kids, I can guarantee that my kids are gonna be successful. Or if I apply this to my students, I can guarantee that they will be successful. Now, I hate being superficial. I really don't like it because I think life is a lot deeper and more intelligent than we think it is. What's that movie Jurassic Park where, you know, he sees the eggs and then he says, nature found its way, when they find that there's been breeding on the island that is not in the lab. So it was just like the dinosaurs found a way to breed. In the same way, that intelligence exists in life. We need to account for it. We need to say, okay, I will do my best. Now, your best should include in it other people's opinions. You shouldn't be like, I've worked it out. If you're approaching things like, oh, I've worked it out, you know, I've been teaching for 10 years, now I know what I'm doing. Or I've been parenting for this long, or I've seen old school parenting and this is what worked. If you're unwilling to learn, then you are teaching that also to your students. A part of being a mentor or teacher is adaptability. I can tell you that when I was at school, and I'm sure, you know, reflect on your teachers, you'll find that the teachers that did a good job on you were the ones that listened to you. They had a method, but they also were able to balance it with listening to you. It wasn't like you learn this way or, you know, you get beaten. And this is where intelligence comes in. Even those dictator methods can even work. We need to be able to see that no one really knows what every individual requires at that particular time. So it's one, what they require as a person, two, what they require in that time, in that phase of their life. There are phases in life where certain characters require a dictator. There are certain parts of life where you require, that same person will require someone who is more flexible. So what I'm trying to say here is, yes, learn the methods of teaching, mentoring, but don't count out your intelligence, your observation. And I think that is going to be a core thing. When you are teaching someone, you need to take into consideration that person's personality. We all have different, maybe learning difficulties, if you want to say it. Like I know, for example, myself, when I was learning English, and even till now, for some reason, when I read something, certain topics especially, I have to read over them a few times to understand. I might have to read over it 2 or 3 times. And now, thank God, with AI, ChatGPT, I will be reading a book. If I can get a PDF copy or something, I will copy and paste text and then read it like that. I'll read it and then I'll make sure I understood it. Before ChatGPT, I used to look at summaries of books just to make sure I understood correctly. If I had a teacher who was not flexible and who was easily frustrated, they would have looked at me and said, this guy has no chance to understand. That teacher would have cost me, they would have made me feel, one, inadequate in myself, and two, instead of my learning happening there, it would have happened much later if I decided to continue. When you are mentoring, when you are parenting, it's not one size fits all. And no matter what you're going to learn in universities, in institutions, be varied in your approach and cultivate your intelligence. A teacher or a mentor should never stop learning. It is probably one of the hardest kinds of jobs to do. Coaching, mentoring, teaching, because it's not just about content. In fact, content will probably be the easiest part. It's mostly about adapting the knowledge so that that person can pick it up. And that will require you to be constantly evolving. You need to be someone here who, okay, I have a student who is set in their ways. They just think this is the way the world is. You have to ask yourself, how do you bring them to see an alternate reality? And this thing that's happening now where we just baby them and whatever they say is right, you are doing them more harm than good. I think this is probably the more politically correct thing to do these days. But it's not gonna last long because it doesn't work. And for the same reason, people who rely on ChatGPT for life advice, it doesn't work because ChatGPT does a thing where it backs everything you say. So your inner reflection and developing that flexibility becomes difficult because suddenly you got this machine that is intelligent and it's telling you, yeah, I understand you, you're doing this right, yeah. And it's just taking what you're feeding it. If it's just giving you back what you're feeding it, naturally it's gonna be highly biased. It only hears half of the story. This is gonna be the edge that having a human being teaching you, not an AI, that you will not allow the other person, and you shouldn't allow the other person to get away with everything. Sometimes you need to play devil's advocate. Sometimes you bring in random things. I mean, this, for example, this talk here, I hadn't planned it word by word. Actually, all I had was just the main idea. And notice the way my brain works, I'm not linear. I will go off tangents. But that's what builds a character. That's what makes you say, aha, I know that teacher goes off track. This teacher, always has to tell a joke. That personality is what students relate to, what your kids relate to. Kids get used to your approach more than your content. So when you're parenting, understand that every child has a way to connect with you. And don't compare yourself as a mentor with other mentors and then think, oh, I wish I was like that other dad who connects better with his kids, because his kids are not your kids. I've worked in teaching and I've had teachers that I thought were lousy teachers, and I'd always think, which student would ever like this teacher? And to my surprise, as I was learning, I'm not like that anymore. To my surprise, that teacher that I thought was lousy, there are kids that like that teacher. So it taught me that you don't know what's inside students' minds. Sometimes kids are like trolls. They're trying to get a reaction out of you. So they'll say something and you think this kid's off the rail. I mean, it can be that case, but it might also be that they are psychologically testing you. So they will throw at you something to see, hey, does this person take the bait? Because if you take the bait, they know how to trigger you from there on. And this is where you need to, as a mentor, teacher, and coach, you need to be constantly upgrading yourself to know that that's how you need to know how your audience reacts, how your audience acts, how your audience tests you, goes through things, puts you on the line, is trying to see through you. They're alive, and because they're alive, you're gonna get live feedback. It's not like I say this, then you take it all in. Sometimes you might say something, it offends somebody. Sometimes you might say something that triggers someone. Sometimes you might say something that today is harmful for that person without meaning to be harmful. And then later on, that might be something that changes their lives. We don't know. And nobody can predict these things. I would say to you, if you are doing these things, mentoring, teaching, and coaching, don't give up. Rather, look for ways to connect. When one thing doesn't work, try another one. Keep going. Look into the research. Reflect. And the same thing applies to parenting. Don't think, the student, the kid does something wrong. That's it, they're off the rails, they're finished. It's game over from here. You know, oh, I caught my kid looking at pornography. That's it. My kid's is a loser for life. My kid skipped school and went somewhere with his friends without telling me. He's a juvenile delinquent. They are going to try to do things. They are, and you need to be adapting. It's a two-way situation. We want to develop ourselves constantly. Look, as long as you're alive, you're going to be developing. If you want to know when does this end, when you're dead. And even when you're dead, there's still going to be some changes that are happening to you. If you're in your field and you're working through difficult situations, of course, make sure the situation is not made difficult because of the system you're working in, because that's a different story. Imagine you're working at a school or an institution that their policies are incorrect. They're making things inefficient for no reason. That's different. If you have a colleague, for example, who is making your mentoring difficult, or your teaching, or even your parenting, that's a different story, because here the issue is not between you and the person you're mentoring. There's an exterior factor that's affecting it, and that we'll leave to another video. Just because you're the mentor, the parent, it does not mean that your learning is over and that you're just transmitting knowledge. It doesn't mean that. Intelligence and communication go hand in hand. Degloirespace signing out.